Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're gonna be looking at something a little bit different.
Yeah, this one's really interesting, I think.
We are going to be diving into the human body, and specifically, we have a source here that is aimed at teaching the parts of the body.
Right. We're going all the way back to the fundamentals here. We have a printable workbook, and it's designed for learners age 3 and up.
Wow.
So very basic, but as we're going to see, there's a lot to unpack even in a resource like this.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see how these basic concepts are presented.
Yeah.
What do we decide to teach first when we're talking about the human body? What's the most important starting point?
Exactly. I mean, we all have a body, we all know our body parts, right? But how does that knowledge actually develop? And what does it tell us about how we understand our physical selves?
Right. So this workbook, it's a matching and identification activity. And
Yeah.
it's neatly broken down by body region. So we have head and neck, arms, torso, legs.
Yep. And then there's a separate section for organs.
Okay, so we're going from the outside in.
Exactly. And our mission today, if you will, is to kind of go beyond the surface level of this children's workbook. We want to look at how it categorizes the body, why this kind of foundational knowledge is so important, and what it reveals about how we learn even beyond those early childhood years.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into activity one, parts of the head and neck.
Yeah.
The workbook lists these terms: cheek, chin, ear, earlobe, eyebrow, eyelash, eyelid, face, forehead, hair, jaw, lip, mouth, neck, nose, nostril, teeth, temple, tongue. Ooh, that's quite a list.
It is, and it covers a lot of ground.
What strikes me right away is how some terms are so broad, like face, and then others are incredibly specific, like eyelash or nostril. What does that tell you about how we start to break down the human form?
It's interesting, isn't it? You start with the overall concept like face, which gives you the big picture, and then as you learn more, you kind of zoom
You
in.
get into the details.
Exactly. And this movement from general to specific, it's a pattern we see in all kinds of learning. Think about learning a new language. You start with basic greetings, and then as you progress, you delve into the more complex grammar, the nuances of pronunciation, things like that.
I see. So it's like building a framework.
Right. So you start with the broad strokes and then gradually fill in the finer details as your understanding deepens.
That makes sense. And speaking of details, something else I noticed is how many of these parts are directly tied to our senses. We've got eyes, ears, nose, tongue.
Yeah.
That seems significant.
It is. And if you think about it, our senses are really our primary way of experiencing and understanding the world, especially early on.
So identifying the parts responsible for seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, those are fundamental to how we navigate and make sense of everything around us.
Exactly. And from an evolutionary perspective, you could even argue that recognizing these parts on ourselves and on others is crucial for social interaction.
Like reading facial expressions, understanding cues.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to activity two, parts of the arms.
Right.
So here the list includes armpit, elbow, arm, finger, fingernail, forearm, hand, knuckle, little finger, middle finger, ring finger, thumb. This feels very much focused on function, like what we do with our arms and hands.
Absolutely. We're not just talking about the arm as a whole anymore. We're getting into the specifics of movement and fine control.
Yeah, the dexterity of the hand is really emphasized here. Listing each individual finger, knuckle, fingernail, it makes you realize just how intricate and capable our hands are.
I think that's a really good point. The
Mhm.
level of detail here really speaks to the importance of our hands and everything we do with them, from the simplest tasks to the most complex creations.
It's like the hand is almost its own microcosm within the body, with so many moving parts working together.
And the language itself reflects that complexity. Each term refers to a specific joint, bone, or structure that contributes to the overall function. It makes you appreciate the evolutionary development that led to such incredibly sophisticated tools.
It really does. Okay, moving on to activity three, parts of the torso. This list is interesting. Abdomen, back, belly button, chest, hips, torso, waist. It feels like a mix of structural and surface terms.
That's true. We've got the big picture terms like torso and back. And then we have these more specific, almost landmark features like belly button and hips.
Yeah, and I wonder, for a young learner, how those different types of terms work together to build their understanding of this central body region.
I think it's about creating a multi-layered mental map. The general terms give you the framework, the basic structure, and then the more specific features give you points of reference, things you can easily see and feel.
It's like building a foundation.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because even though we're talking about external features, it's hard not to think about what the torso contains, right?
Right.
It's housing all these vital organs.
Right. And even though the workbook doesn't explicitly address the internal organs in this section, I think it subtly introduces the idea that there's more to the body than just what we see on the surface.
Like it's setting the stage for a deeper understanding.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to activity 4, parts of the legs. Here we have ankle, arch, cast, foot, heel, instep, knee, leg, shin, sole, thigh, toe. Again, we're seeing a focus on function here.
Absolutely. Many of these terms relate directly to movement and support. The ankle, the arch of the foot, the heel, the knee, they're all essential for how we stand, walk, run.
It's about mobility, stability.
Exactly.
It's interesting to compare this section to the parts of the arms. We got very specific with individual fingers there, but here, while we have toe, it's singular. There's no breakdown into big toe, little toe, etc. What do you make of that?
That's a really good observation, and I think it might reflect the difference in primary function. The hand is all about fine manipulation, using each finger with precision, whereas the foot, while obviously important for movement, functions more as a single unit for balance and stability.
So the level of detail reflects the nature of the task.
Exactly.
Okay, this brings us to activity 5, organs of the body. And this feels like a big shift, going from the external features to the internal parts that we can't see.
It is. It's going from what we can see and touch to those unseen but essential components that keep us alive.
The list is appendix, arteries, bladder, bones, brain, capillaries, diaphragm, heart, kidney, large intestine, larynx, liver, lungs, muscles, pancreas, pharynx, rectum, small intestine, spleen, stomach, thyroid, veins. That is quite a mouthful.
It is a long list, and it covers a lot of systems. But even at this early stage, introducing these terms is so important.
Why is that?
Because it starts to build an awareness that there's this whole other level of complexity going on inside our bodies. It lays the groundwork for understanding biology and health later on.
Right, because it's easy to take for granted all the amazing things happening inside us that we never even think about.
Absolutely. And even though the workbook lists these organs individually, it's important to remember they don't function in isolation.
They're all connected.
Right. They work together in these intricate systems that keep everything running smoothly.
It's like an orchestra.
Exactly. You need all the different instruments working in harmony to create the music. And in the body, we have the circulatory system, the digestive system, the respiratory system, nervous system, skeletal system, muscular system, and so on.
Wow. And they're all represented in this list, even at this basic level.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about the human body?
It's a testament to the incredible complexity and interconnectedness of our physiology. Every single organ has a role to play, and they all rely on each other to function properly.
It's truly remarkable.
It is.
Now, beyond the lists themselves, the workbook includes a few other elements that I think are worth mentioning.
Sure.
After each activity, there's a My Checklist section, so the learner can check off each part as they identify it.
That's a nice way to encourage active engagement, and it allows them to track their own progress, which can be motivating.
Right. And then there's a section called What I Have Learned. So the learner can write down, in their own words, what they've taken away from the activity.
I like that a lot. It encourages them to reflect on the information, to really process what they've just learned, and that can be a powerful tool for deeper understanding.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's a score space, so you can keep track of how many parts you've correctly identified. Even in this simple format, assessment plays a role.
Right. It gives you feedback on your progress and helps you identify areas where you might need to focus a little more attention.
And finally, at the end of the workbook, there's a certificate of achievement, which is a nice touch.
It is. I think it's important to celebrate achievements, even small ones, and a certificate like this can be a really positive reinforcement, especially for young learners.
It's a great way to end the learning experience on a positive note.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really amazing to see how much we can learn about the human body and about learning itself from a simple children's workbook.
I agree. It might seem basic at first glance, but when we really look at how the information is presented and the different elements included, it reveals a lot about how we approach learning about ourselves.
And it reminds us that even the most complex knowledge has to start somewhere. We begin by categorizing, labeling, identifying. And from there, we can gradually build our understanding.
Exactly. It's like laying the foundation for a lifelong journey of learning.
And as you continue that journey, as you learn more about the incredible intricacies of the human body, the way you think about those individual parts will continue to evolve.
Absolutely.
So our final thought for you today is this. As you delve deeper into understanding the body, think about how your perspective shifts. What are the limitations of simply categorizing the body into these neat little sections? How does a more holistic view enhance our appreciation for its amazing complexity? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.